Get your daughter out of the way. Those beds are already dead. The 7th hospital bed rolled off the lift before Marcus Reed could answer, its steel rail cutting toward 10-year-old Nia as she raised her yellow flashlight. Marcus caught the frame with his shoulder, blood opening across his palm. Behind him, CEO Evelyn Cross watched beneath the hospital loading lights while Daniel Pike reached for the transfer papers. Nia aimed the beam at 4 clean screws beneath a red discarded label. "Dad," she whispered. Somebody opened it. 3 hours earlier, the narrow windows of Reed Medical Repair had been trembling whenever trucks passed on the avenue. The shop smelled of machine oil, warm dust, and the burnt coffee Marcus had forgotten beside an overdue rent notice. He stood at his workbench in a faded navy jacket, tightening the wheel lock on a portable exam table while Nia finished a math worksheet at the small desk behind the yellow safety line. The wind pressed through the loose garage door seal with a thin whistle that rose and fell like a monitor alarm. Marcus heard the Cross Memorial truck before he saw it. Heavy diesel, loose chains, metal shifting without padding. He set down his wrench and stepped outside as the vehicle backed toward his door. Evelyn Cross climbed from a black sedan in a charcoal suit, her hospital badge resting against a silk blouse. Daniel followed with a leather folder tucked under one arm and the careful smile of a man arriving to solve a problem no one else understood. "Mr. Reed," Evelyn said, checking her watch. "Cross Memorial is transferring 12 decommissioned beds to you as scrap. The disposal fee has already been waived." Marcus looked past her. The beds had red labels across their rails, but no protective wrapping, no inspection seals, and no braces around the wheels. "Those are patient beds," he said. "They should be secured." "They are dead inventory," Evelyn replied. "Your shop requested salvage material." "Usable parts," Marcus said. "Not equipment dropped off a truck." Daniel opened the folder. "Everything has been evaluated. Twice. We are simply helping a local small business recover whatever metal value remains." One of the workers released the first bed. It struck the pavement hard enough to ring through the garage walls. Nia flinched but stayed behind the doorway. The second landed on its side. By the 5th, Marcus had begun locking each set of wheels before the next one came down, protecting the frames even while the hospital crew treated them like junk. Then bed number 7 slipped sideways. Marcus caught it before it reached Nia, taking the sharp edge across his palm. Evelyn's gaze paused for half a second on the blood, then moved to Daniel's paperwork. "Have him sign," she said. Daniel offered Marcus a pen. "Just acknowledge that the C-41 control bays are not to be opened. The units are beyond repair." Marcus's eyes lifted slowly. The model plate was hidden beneath the red label. He had not mentioned a control bay. He handed the pen back, checked Nia's arms and face, then wrapped his palm with a clean shop cloth. "I'll sign for 12 beds," he said. "I won't sign that I inspected them." Daniel's smile remained in place, but his thumb pressed hard into the folder's edge. "You're making this more difficult than necessary." Marcus knelt beside number 7. Nia stayed safely behind him and aimed her flashlight where he pointed. The yellow beam revealed fresh fingerprints in the dust, a pale rectangle around the access panel, and for new screw heads shining against metal that had not been cleaned in years. Evelyn turned toward her car, but the silence behind her made her stop. Marcus lifted one corner of the discarded label. Beneath it, 3 digits from the asset number were still visible, scratched deeply but not completely erased. "A dead machine doesn't usually have fresh fingerprints," he said. Daniel closed the folder. For the first time, his polite expression failed to reach his eyes. Marcus looked closer at the damaged number, and his breath slowed. Someone had not merely thrown the bed away. Someone had tried to erase which bed it was. Marcus kept his eyes on the 3 damaged digits beneath the red label while Daniel stepped closer and lowered his voice. "That number means nothing now." "Then why was it scratched off?" "Because the unit was retired." The loading dock lights hummed above them, turning the dried blood on Marcus's shop cloth almost black. Nia stood inside the garage doorway with her yellow flashlight lowered against her leg, watching the adults decide which parts of the truth she was allowed to hear. Daniel opened the leather folder again and placed the transfer form on the raised mattress platform of bed number 7. Mr. Reed, Cross Memorial is donating salvage material to a struggling local business. We would hate for a generous arrangement to become unnecessarily complicated. His words were smooth, almost kind. The paper smelled faintly of printer heat and expensive cologne. Sign the acknowledgement. I can sign for 12 beds. Sign the whole form. I didn't inspect the whole form's claims. Evelyn had reached her sedan, but Marcus's calm refusal made her glance back. She did not return to the bed. She remained beside the open car door, one hand resting on the roof, observing him as though he were a delay that had developed a voice. Daniel tapped the paragraph marked Technical Disposition. It stated that 2 qualified reviewers had independently determined every bed to be unsafe, uneconomical to repair, and approved for destruction. Marcus read it twice. Then he uncapped the pen, drew one clean line through the final sentence, and wrote beneath it, "Condition not independently verified by recipient." Daniel's smile tightened. "You repair used equipment in a converted garage." "Yes." "You are not part of our biomedical department." "No." "Then perhaps you should leave hospital determinations to hospital professionals." A forklift chain clinked behind them as the workers began gathering the loose straps. Somewhere inside the shop, the old ventilation fan clicked once every rotation. Marcus looked down at the form rather than at Daniel. The second review stamp was faint and slightly crooked, its blue border crossing a printed date. "Who performed the reviews?" he asked.
Qualified personnel.
"Names? Protected internal information. Their names should be on the report." Daniel placed 2 fingers over the signature block before Marcus could study it longer. "Mr. Reed, people in your position sometimes mistake caution for expertise. I understand why. When money is tight, scrap can start looking like opportunity." Nia's fingers tightened around the flashlight. Marcus saw it and turned away from Daniel long enough to crouch beside her. He checked the small smear of grease on her wrist, wiped it away with the clean corner of his cloth, and spoke softly. "You did exactly right staying behind the line. I only held the light. That was your job. You did it safely." Daniel watched them with a patient expression that felt rehearsed. "Children should not be around regulated medical equipment. I would hate for anyone to misunderstand what happens in this shop." Marcus rose slowly. "She does homework behind a safety line. She doesn't touch powered equipment." "Of course," Daniel said. "I'm sure you believe your precautions are adequate." Evelyn's gaze shifted from Daniel to the yellow stripe painted across the garage floor, then to Nia standing clearly behind it. For the first time, something in Daniel's version failed to fit perfectly. But she only said, "We have policies for a reason." Marcus nodded. "Policies should describe what happened, not replace it." The dock went quiet except for the idling truck. Daniel slid the paper toward him again and pointed to the signature line. Marcus signed only the receipt of 12 units, dated it, and photographed every page with his old phone before tearing off the yellow carbon copy. Daniel reached for it at once. "Hospital records stay with the hospital. This copy says recipient. It is easier if we maintain the complete file." "Easier for who?" The question was not loud, but Evelyn's eyes lifted. Daniel withdrew his hand and gave a small professional laugh. "No one is trying to take anything from you, Mr. Reed." Behind him, one of the hospital workers murmured to another, "He'll strip them by morning and claim he found gold." Marcus heard it. Nia heard it too. He did not turn around. He folded the carbon copy once, placed it in the inner pocket of his navy jacket, and began locking the remaining wheels so no other bed could roll toward the street. One by one, the hospital employees left without helping him move the frames under cover. Evelyn entered her sedan. Daniel remained long enough to hand Marcus a business card. "Your facility license expires in 6 weeks, he said quietly. "Compliance reviews can become very detailed when unapproved medical devices are being opened near a minor." His tone never changed. It sounded less like a threat than advice from someone concerned for Marcus's future. Marcus looked at the card, Then at Daniel. I haven't opened anything. Let's make sure it stays that way. Daniel walked to the sedan. As the black car pulled away, its tires sent a thin spray of dirty water across the curb. Nia waited until it turned the corner before speaking. Dad, are they going to close us? Marcus looked at the overdue rent notice through the garage window, then at the 12 beds crowding the yard. Not because we told the truth on a form. He carried the transfer papers inside and called the state licensing office. Under the cold fluorescent light, he verified exactly what his certification allowed, wrote down the representative's name, and saved the call record beside the photographs. Only then did he examine the yellow copy. The second inspection had supposedly occurred on a Sunday when Cross Memorial's entire technical wing had been closed during an electrical shutdown. The employee identification number beside the signature contained only 5 digits, an older format the hospital had stopped using years ago. Marcus entered the name printed beneath it into the public professional registry. The old fan clicked overhead. Nia's pencil stopped moving. On the screen, beside Harold Benton's certification record, appeared 2 words that made the room feel suddenly smaller. Deceased, 2024. Marcus stared at the words deceased, 2024 until the fluorescent light above him flickered and steadied. Harold Benton had not inspected those beds last week. He had not signed anything. Nia looked up from her worksheet, her pencil still pinched between 2 fingers. Does that mean somebody lied? Marcus closed the registry page and turned the phone face down. It means we don't guess before we know. He placed the yellow carbon copy inside a clear sleeve, wrote the time across the seal, and locked it in the small fireproof cabinet beneath his workbench. The old ventilation fan clicked again. Outside, wind pressed the red discarded labels against the steel rails with a dry paper rattle. Marcus glanced at the overdue rent notice beside his cold coffee, then at the portable exam table waiting near the lift. Its left wheel needed a new bearing. Finishing that repair by morning would earn enough to cover most of the shop's electric bill. He opened the bottom drawer and removed the last sealed bearing he had in stock. Nia watched him hold it beneath the light. That's the one for Mr. Collins's table, right? It is. And he's coming tomorrow. He is. Before Marcus could open the package, a soft scraping sound came from the sidewalk. Metal dragged across concrete in uneven beats, followed by a woman's breath catching each time the front wheel of her walker locked. Margaret Cross stood outside the garage door in a plain wool coat, one hand gripping the frame and the other pressed against her side. Her silver hair had loosened beneath a knitted hat. She had no driver, no assistant, and nothing about her suggested that anyone at Cross Memorial would rise when she entered a room. "I'm sorry," she said. "The pharmacy told me there was a repair shop here. I only need it to last until I catch the 6:40 bus." Marcus checked the clock. The bus came once an hour after dark. "Bring it inside. I can't pay much. I didn't ask yet." He guided her to the only chair without grease on it and set the walker upside down on a rubber mat. One bearing had cracked, leaving the wheel tilted inward. Marcus tested the other side, then opened the sealed package meant for his paying job. Nia's eyes moved from the bearing to the rent notice, but she said nothing. Marcus pressed the new part into Margaret's wheel, adjusted both hand grips to match her height, and leaned his own weight onto the frame 3 times before returning it. "Try it slowly." Margaret took 2 careful steps. The wheel rolled without scraping. Her shoulders lowered as if someone had loosened a strap around them. "How much?" Marcus wiped his hands. "Nothing. That part was new. The wheel needed it. So does your business, by the look of things." Her gaze passed over the peeling Reed Medical Repair sign, the plastic bucket catching a roof leak, and Nia's schoolbooks stacked beside a toolbox. Marcus did not defend the shop. He folded Margaret's old cracked bearing into a paper towel and placed it in her coat pocket in case another technician needed to see what had failed. "The bus stops dark," he said. "I'll walk you over." Margaret glanced at the 12 beds outside. "You still plan to work on those?" "First I plan to learn who owns them. The hospital discarded them. That doesn't always mean the hospital had the right." She studied his face, but he had already picked up her shopping bag. Nia pulled on her hoodie and stayed close to his side as they walked Margaret to the corner. The evening air smelled of wet pavement and brake dust. At the bus shelter, Marcus tested the walker's brakes once more, then stood between Margaret and the traffic until the bus arrived. She pressed folded bills into his hand. He closed her fingers around them. Use it for the ride home. Why help a stranger when you're clearly short yourself? Marcus looked toward Nia, who was tracing a star sticker on the handle of her yellow flashlight. Because needing help shouldn't make somebody prove they deserve it. The bus doors opened. Margaret climbed aboard, then turned as if she wanted to say something more. Instead, she gave Marcus a long, searching look and disappeared into the warm interior light. Back at the shop, Nia found a white handkerchief on the chair where Margaret had been sitting. A silver oak tree was stitched into one corner. She forgot this. Marcus folded it carefully, intending to return it if she came back. When a streak of black grease transferred onto the cloth, he used the clean edge to wipe the lower frame of bed number 7. Beneath the red label, the same silver oak appeared stamped into the metal. Marcus peeled the paper back another inch. A line of tiny lettering emerged under the glue: Cross Community Care Foundation, Restricted Medical Asset. The wind rattled the garage door, but Marcus no longer heard it. The woman whose walker he had repaired had carried the same symbol as the bed someone was trying to erase. Marcus held the handkerchief beneath the fluorescent light until the silver oak stitched into its corner, and the stamped oak beneath the torn, discarded label seemed to mirror each other. Nia stood beside the workbench, still wearing her hoodie from the bus stop. "Does that mean the lady owns the beds?" she asked. "It means the symbol belongs to both," Marcus said. "That's all we know." He folded the handkerchief into a clean envelope, wrote the time across the flap, and placed it beside the yellow transfer form rather than carrying it in his pocket. Before he could photograph the lettering on the frame, his old phone vibrated against the steel bench. The caller ID Red Cross Memorial Administration. Daniel Pike's voice arrived warm and measured. "Mr. Reed, we were notified that you removed a restricted asset label." Marcus looked at the half-lifted red sticker. "I lifted one corner. You were told not to alter the units. I was told not to open the control bay." A brief silence passed through the line. The ventilation fan clicked once overhead. Nia looked from the phone to the bed, sensing the change without understanding it. "The distinction won't matter to a compliance officer," Daniel said. "Those beds were legally decommissioned. Any foundation mark is historical." Marcus studied the exposed words "restricted medical asset." "Who authorized the foundation release?" "That information is internal." "Then how do you know the mark is historical?" Daniel did not answer immediately. When he spoke again, the sympathy in his voice had sharpened. "I understand you are trying to create value from donated scrap, especially under financial pressure. But contacting trustees or suggesting impropriety could expose you to serious liability." Through the garage windows, headlights swept across the row of beds and vanished. Marcus could smell cold rain blowing under the door and the faint antiseptic odor still trapped in the mattresses. "I haven't contacted anyone," he said. "Good. Let's keep this professional." The call ended before Marcus could ask how Daniel knew the foundation. Label had been exposed less than 10 minutes after he uncovered it. The next morning, Marcus did not touch the electronics. He called Luis Ortega, a retired biomedical technician who had once inspected equipment for county clinics, and asked him to witness a visual examination only. Luis arrived carrying a hard black case and a paper cup of coffee. His gray eyebrows lifted when he saw the 12 beds crowded into the yard. "Hospital called these dead? That's what the form says." "And what do you say?" Marcus handed him gloves. "I say we look before we speak." They placed bed number 7 beneath the brightest ceiling fixture. Marcus set his phone on a tripod, showed the unbroken panel edges to the camera, and read the time aloud. Nia remained behind the yellow line with her flashlight. Her only job was to hold the beam where Marcus pointed and read numbers slowly. Marcus removed the 4 screws one at a time, placing each on a magnetic tray in the exact shape of the panel. The first screw came free with almost no resistance. The second carried fresh silver shavings in its threads. Inside, the control module sat clean against a housing coated in years of dust. Luis leaned closer but did not touch it. "Replacement?" he asked. "Maybe." Marcus angled the flashlight across the metal plate. Nia read the last 3 numbers on the bed frame. 742. Now the controller. She squinted. 196. Luis lowered his coffee. "Not a match." Marcus said nothing. A replacement module could be legitimate. Hospitals swapped parts all the time. He checked the manufacturing date. The controller was 4 years newer than the frame, yet the service sticker claimed it had been installed before that controller model existed. Marcus moved to bed number 3. Same bright screws. Same crescent-shaped scratch near the lower right corner. Same batch code on the module. Bed number 11 carried it too. 3 mismatched controllers from one lot could still have come from a bulk repair, but there should have been service records, updated labels, and matching authorization numbers. None were present. Marcus photographed each plate beside a ruler, then closed every panel. Exactly as he had found it. He sent Evelyn Cross 3 images and 1 sentence. Was this controller substitution authorized? 38 minutes later, her reply came through Daniel. The C41 series was recalled for electrical fire risk. No further inspection is permitted. Marcus read the message twice. Evelyn had not accused him of lying, but she had accepted an explanation that sounded reasonable. He opened the public recall database, typed C41, and found no safety notice, no field correction, no manufacturer alert. The model remained approved and under warranty for another 6 months. Nia watched his face. "Is the computer wrong?" "Not this time." Marcus placed Daniel's message beside the exposed foundation wording and the photograph of Harold Benton's dead credential. Then he noticed the most troubling detail of all. His email to Evelyn had shown only serial numbers and screw marks. He had never told anyone the controller was a C41. Marcus kept Daniel's message open beside the recall database. The word C41 series was recalled glowing above a search result that said no active safety actions. Luis leaned over the workbench without touching the phone. "He named the model before you did." "Yes." "You going to call him?" "Not yet." The garage was quiet enough for Marcus to hear rain ticking against the metal vent and Nia's eraser moving across her math page behind the yellow line. He turned both phones toward the camera, recorded the conflicting information, then printed the manufacturer's warranty page and placed it in the evidence sleeve. A reasonable explanation still existed. The wrong modules might have been installed during a legitimate repair. The recall claim might have come from an internal advisory. Marcus would not accuse anyone until the machine answered what the paperwork would not. He and Luis searched the plastic bins delivered with the beds, examining each cable and bracket without disturbing the original arrangement. At the bottom of the 4th bin, beneath cracked casters and bent rails, Marcus found a silver anti-static bag marked burned. "Do not use." The handwriting was thick and hurried. There was no technician's name, no test reading, and no photograph of heat damage. Inside lay a genuine controller bearing the same asset family as bed number 7. The circuit board smelled of dust, not burned insulation. Luis lifted his eyebrows. Could still be dead. Could be. Marcus set an isolation transformer on the rubber mat, checked its calibration sticker, and positioned his phone so the clock, meter, controller, and unopened panel remained visible in one continuous frame. He called the manufacturer's technical line, read the serial number aloud, and asked only whether a non-loaded diagnostic test was permitted. The representative confirmed the procedure and emailed the written steps. Marcus printed them before beginning. Nia watched from behind the stripe, her shoulders less tight now that the work had rules she understood. "Can I hold the flashlight?" "From there." "And red numbers?" "Only when I ask." Marcus tested the controller's resistance, insulation, and grounding points. Every value fell within the manufacturer's acceptable range. No burn mark appeared beneath the magnifying lamp. No fuse had opened. No component showed heat discoloration. Luis signed the measurement sheet as witness. Marcus then reopened bed number 7, replaced the mismatched controller with the genuine one, and connected the unit through isolated power. "Ready?" Luis asked. Marcus rested one hand near the emergency cutoff. "Start the camera clock." The bed gave a low electronic tone. The screen flashed amber, then blue. The head section rose 6 inches, paused, and lowered smoothly. The leg platform followed. Four-wheel locks engaged with clean mechanical clicks. The load alarm sounded once and cleared. Even the nurse call indicator illuminated. Nia's breath left her in a small relieved laugh, but Marcus did not smile. He completed the manufacturer's self-test, shut off the power, and removed the controller. "That proves the bed can function," Luis said. "It doesn't prove why they condemned it." "Not yet." The only sound was the air conditioner cycling above them. On the workbench, Nia's pencil stopped rolling and settled against her notebook. Marcus placed the controller in a tamper-evident bag, signed across the seal, and asked Luis to add his initials. He did not upload the video or call Evelyn to announce he had been right. Instead, he opened the service memory port and downloaded the internal log onto 2 clean drives. The entries appeared in neat rows: motorcycles, safety checks, position errors, maintenance access. 3 days before Cross Memorial declared the bed beyond repair, it had completed every operational test without a fault. Then, at 2:14 in the morning, someone had logged in under Harold Benton's technician code and manually entered a critical controller error. Marcus enlarged the entry. The code had not been generated by a sensor. It had been typed. His old phone rang before he could speak. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. Marcus let it ring while Luis photographed the log. Across town, Margaret had already sent Evelyn the self-test video. Evelyn watched bed number 7 rise on her office monitor, then slowly placed her hand on the unsigned payment authorization for Victor Hale. Daniel entered carrying a reassuring explanation about an old shared login, but Evelyn had already messaged her IT director. "Preserve every access record connected to Harold Benton. Delete nothing." Back at the garage, Nia looked at the dead man's name on Marcus's screen. So the bed wasn't lying? Marcus sealed the first drive and handed the second to Luis. "Machines usually don't." A city inspection notice slid through the mail slot and landed face up on the concrete. It accused Reed Medical Repair of operating dangerous hospital equipment near a child. Marcus looked from the notice to the service log. Whoever had used a dead man's identity now knew the bed had spoken. The city inspection notice lay beside the sealed service log like a warning written by the same hand. Marcus read the accusation twice. Unsafe operation of regulated hospital equipment in the presence of a minor. The language was careful, professional, and almost identical to Daniel Pike's warning from the loading dock. Luis looked toward Nia, who was seated behind the yellow safety line with her school books closed. "They moved fast." "Too fast," Marcus said. Before the inspectors arrived, he copied the service log onto an encrypted drive, placed the original in a fireproof evidence pouch, and called the attorney who volunteered for Hope Street Free Clinic. He did not post the video, confront Daniel, or send the dead technician's name to the press. "Why not show everybody?" Nia asked. Marcus zipped her backpack and checked that her flashlight was inside. "Because truth can still be damaged if you carry it carelessly." The inspectors arrived under a gray morning sky. Their shoes left wet prints across the concrete floor, and their radios hissed softly beneath the hum of the fluorescent lights. Marcus gave them his license, the manufacturer's written testing procedure, the recorded call with the state office, and the continuous video showing Nia behind the safety line. One inspector measured the distance from her desk to the test area. Another photographed the isolation transformer and the locked cabinet. They found no powered equipment near her, no missing safety barriers, and no evidence Marcus had treated a patient. Still, they placed a temporary red seal across the testing station until Cross Memorial verified ownership of the beds. "How long?" Marcus asked. "Could be a week." The overdue rent notice was still visible beneath his coffee mug. A week meant losing the portable exam table contract. Losing that contract meant the landlord's 7-day deadline would arrive before Marcus could earn enough to stop it. Daniel called while the inspectors were still packing their measuring tape. I'm relieved the city intervened before anyone was hurt, he said. No one was hurt. That is usually when prevention works best. Through the shop window, Marcus saw one inspector pause at the yellow safety line, then glance back at Nia doing fractions at her desk. Daniel continued in the same gentle tone. Return the beds, and I'm sure this misunderstanding can end quietly. Marcus looked at the red seal crossing his equipment. Quiet for whom? Daniel ended the call. That afternoon, Luis arrived with printed invoices spread beneath his coat to keep them dry. The controller found in the scrap bin carried a batch number Cross Memorial had paid for 8 months earlier as a brand new replacement component. Yet the same batch number appeared again on a sales invoice from Hale Medical Systems to a private rehabilitation center in another county. The seller was not listed as Hale Medical. It was a company called North Bridge Clinical Services. Its mailing address matched the law office representing Victor Hale. One controller had been purchased by the hospital, removed before installation, labeled burned, and then sold again through a second company. Luis laid a third document beside it. It isn't only number 7. 6 other serial numbers appeared across both sets of invoices. Marcus felt the room narrow around the paper. This was no careless repair. Someone had created profit by making working equipment appear worthless. His phone vibrated with a message from the Hope Street attorney. She had found an internal email attached to an older charity audit. Accelerate disposal before audit window. The metadata traced the message to Daniel's hospital account. Beside it was the Oak Tree Foundation agreement. 2 independent technical reviews were required before any donated bed could be sold, destroyed, or transferred. One signature belonged to Harold Benton, 2 years after his death. The other came from a consulting company whose payment records led back to Victor. Across town, Evelyn sat alone in her glass office while the printer released page after page of access records. The sound stopped abruptly when the final sheet landed. Harold's account had not been shared. It had been disabled after his funeral, then reactivated for 11 minutes on the night the false fault code was entered. Daniel stood across from her desk, his hands folded neatly. Legacy systems do strange things, he said. Evelyn placed the audit email between them. What did you mean by audit window? A drop of sweat appeared near Daniel's temple, though the office was cold. Routine inventory language. I didn't say those words came from an email. Daniel's eyes shifted toward the security camera in the corner before returning to her. It was a movement so small Evelyn might once have ignored it. She did not ignore it now. Instead of accusing him, she asked an outside equipment auditor to attend the hospital's public launch of the new beds the next morning. Back at the garage, Marcus sent one encrypted copy of every document to the Hope Street attorney and another to Luis. He could have released the invoices that night and watched Daniel's reputation collapse before sunrise. Instead, he protected the chain of evidence, packed Nia's clothes for a night at her aunt's house, and covered the 12 beds against the rain. Are we losing the shop? She asked as he locked the fireproof cabinet. Marcus looked at the red inspection seal, the rent notice, and the row of machines someone had tried to erase. Maybe the building, he said. Not the work. Not who we are. At 9:12 that night, a formal order arrived requiring him to return all 12 beds during Cross Memorial's public equipment ceremony the next morning. The truth was no longer something they could settle behind a closed office door. By sunrise, it would either be taken away in silence or placed where the entire hospital could see it. By 8 the next morning, the rear loading court of Cross Memorial no longer looked like a place where equipment was discarded. White event tents stood along the brick wall. A blue banner stretched above the dock doors. The future of patient safety. Hospital trustees sat in folding chairs facing a polished demonstration platform where 3 new beds gleamed beneath television lights. Marcus arrived in his faded navy work jacket with Luis beside him and the sealed evidence case held low against his leg. He looked tired. Rain had dried in pale marks across his shoulders. Nia was not with him. She was safe at her aunt's house, far from the cameras, the security officers, and the people who had already tried to turn her presence into an accusation against her father. Daniel Pike met Marcus at the entrance with 2 hospital attorneys and the same patient smile he had worn at the garage. "Mr. Reed, thank you for complying. I brought the beds, and the hospital will take custody from here." After the independent review, Daniel's smile remained, but one attorney shifted her folder against her chest. Beyond them, Evelyn stood near the first row of trustees. She wore black instead of charcoal, and her CEO badge hung perfectly straight. She did not greet Marcus. She only looked once at the evidence case, then toward the outside equipment auditor seated beside the hospital's legal counsel. Victor Hale stepped onto the platform as local reporters raised their cameras. He spoke about innovation, reduced risk, and Cross Memorial's commitment to replacing obsolete machinery that endangered vulnerable patients. Behind him, a screen displayed photographs of the 12 discarded beds, including number 7, its red label visible like a verdict already delivered. Then Daniel invited Marcus forward. He introduced him as the salvage recipient who exceeded the permitted scope of handling. The phrasing was gentle enough to sound fair. It made Marcus appear reckless without calling him a liar. Daniel held up the transfer form. Mr. Reed signed for decommissioned material, then opened regulated equipment in a facility where his minor child was present. Any irregular readings he claims to have found occurred after hospital custody ended. A few trustees leaned toward one another. A reporter wrote something quickly. For a moment, Daniel's explanation settled over the crowd with the clean weight of procedure. Marcus placed the yellow carbon copy on the display table. "Read the line above my signature." Daniel did not move. The outside auditor reached for the paper instead. "Condition not independently verified by recipient." The handwritten sentence sat beneath the crossed-out technical conclusion. The loading court grew quieter. Marcus added the photograph showing the same wording before the hospital left his shop. "I signed for 12 units, he said. "I did not certify a story I hadn't tested." Daniel lifted another document. The units were reviewed by qualified personnel before disposal. Marcus opened the evidence case and placed Harold Benton's inspection record beside the public certification registry. One reviewer died 2 years before the date on that form. The first ripple of whispers moved through the chairs. Daniel did not flinch. Mr. Benton's credentials remained in a legacy system used by multiple technicians. It was an administrative error, not fraud. It was plausible. Several faces that had tightened began to soften again. Victor exhaled through his nose and adjusted his cuff. Evelyn watched Daniel, not Marcus. Marcus placed 3 photographs on the table. The scratched asset number beneath the red label, the Silver Oak Foundation stamp, and the mismatched controller serial. Then explain why a restricted foundation asset was stripped of its identity. Victor stepped forward before Daniel could answer. "Replacement controllers are common. That proves maintenance, not misconduct." The outside auditor nodded slowly. "That is possible." For the second time, the room tilted back toward them. Marcus did not argue. He removed the sealed controller bag, the manufacturer's self-test report, and the service log showing bed number 7 had operated normally 3 days before disposal. "A replacement can be legitimate," he said. "A false error entered under a dead man's login is not." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the back of an empty chair. Daniel's eyes moved briefly toward the loading dock camera above the doors. Before anyone could respond, a clear voice came from behind the trustees. "And neither is selling property my foundation never released." Margaret Cross walked into the court using the walker Marcus had repaired. The silver oak pin rested on her coat. Evelyn turned so quickly her badge struck the chair. "Mother!" Margaret placed the original Oaktree Foundation agreement on the table and looked at the 12 beds lined beneath the awning. "My husband and I purchased these for patients who could not afford better rooms. 2 independent inspections were required before a single one could be discarded." Daniel moved toward her with practiced concern. "Mrs. Cross, this is not the appropriate setting for a complicated contractual discussion. You knew my name when you hid the foundation mark." The cameras turned. Victor stepped between Margaret and the display as though shielding an elderly woman from confusion. "This can be handled privately." Marcus's voice remained low. That is how it stayed buried. Margaret drew breath to answer, but her hand suddenly closed around the walker's grip. The color left her face. The papers slid from her fingers. Evelyn reached her as Margaret folded toward the concrete beside bed number 7. Doctors moved through the chairs. A cardiac nurse called for a specialized positioning bed, while another checked the new demonstration units. The screen on the nearest one flashed module authorization pending. Daniel ordered security to clear Marcus from the area. Do not let him touch hospital equipment. Marcus locked the wheels on number 7 and looked to the cardiologist, not to Evelyn. Check the required angle. The doctor read Margaret's temporary hospital tag and gave the number. Marcus rested his hand on the sealed controller bag. Daniel pointed at it. That C-41 module is not authorized for ICU use. The entire loading court slowed. Even Victor turned toward him. Marcus had never announced which module was inside the sealed bag. Evelyn stared at Daniel, then at the bed, then at her mother struggling for breath on the concrete. Can you prove it is safe? She asked Marcus. Under supervision. And can it help her? Yes. Evelyn looked to the independent auditor, who gave one measured nod. She ordered security to stand down. Marcus broke the outer evidence seal, then stopped. Along its lower edge ran a hair-thin cut that had not been there when Luis initialed the bag. Someone had tried to reach the controller before the ceremony, and the inner security code was the only thing left that could prove whether the evidence had survived. Marcus held the tamper-evident bag beneath the event lights while the independent auditor leaned close enough to read the inner security code. The outer plastic had been cut, but the numbered strip inside remained unbroken. Original seal intact, the auditor said. Record that on camera. A reporter lowered her microphone. The cardiologist's hand stayed on Margaret's shoulder while her breathing came shallow and fast against the concrete. Evelyn looked at Marcus. Do it. He opened the bag under 3 cameras, removed the genuine C-41 controller, and set it beside the scratched serial plate on bed number 7. Nia was not in the loading court, but Luis held her yellow flashlight, the small blue star still fixed to its handle. He aimed the beam where Marcus pointed. Frame number, Marcus said. 742, Luis read. Controller removed from the bed? 196. Controller from the sealed bag? Luis turned it beneath the light. 742. The only sound was the soft alarm from the cardiac monitor beside Margaret. Marcus installed the matching controller, checked the ground connection, locked all 4 wheels, and looked to the auditor. Power. The screen flickered amber. Daniel took 1 step forward. This is not an approved clinical test. It is the manufacturer's emergency diagnostic sequence, the auditor replied. You signed the policy that permits it. Daniel stopped. The bed completed its self-check. Blue light spread across the control panel. Marcus tested the head lift without a patient, then stepped back for the cardiologist to confirm the angle. 30 degrees, she said. Raise to 45 when I tell you. Marcus and the medical team transferred Margaret carefully. He kept one hand near the emergency cutoff while the motor lifted her upper body with a low, even hum. Her breathing eased. The tension in her jaw softened. The monitor's alarm slowed, then stopped. Around the loading court, chairs no longer scraped. Camera shutters stopped clicking. Even the new demonstration beds behind Victor seemed suddenly too bright and too clean. Marcus waited until the cardiologist nodded. Only then did he remove his gloves. She is stable enough to move, the doctor said. Evelyn closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them toward Marcus. He did not ask for gratitude. He turned to the evidence table. Now we finish the inspection. He placed the scratched asset photograph beside the mismatched controller. Next came the service log showing bed number 7 had passed every operating test 3 days before disposal. Then the 2:14 a.m. manual fault entry under Harold Benton's dead credential. Luis connected the encrypted drive to the event monitor. The access record appeared behind Marcus in white letters on black. Daniel lifted his chin. A legacy login does not establish criminal intent. No, Marcus said. It establishes access. He laid down the double invoices. One showed Cross Memorial buying the controller as a new hospital part. The other showed the same batch number sold again through North Bridge Clinical Services. The outside auditor confirmed the matching serials. Victor's face lost color, but his voice remained controlled. Billing duplication happens. Vendors correct it internally. Evelyn looked toward the hospital's legal counsel. Was it corrected? The attorney scanned the page. No credit, refund, or amended invoice appears in the record. Marcus placed the Oaktree Foundation agreement beside the documents. 2 technical reviews had been required. One bore the dead man's credential. The other traced to a consulting firm paid by Victor. Daniel reached for his pen, but it slipped from his fingers and struck the concrete with a small metallic click. The camera footage was incomplete, he said. Nothing here proves who moved the modules. Marcus looked at the loading dock camera above them. The primary recording lost 17 minutes. Daniel's hand froze halfway toward the pen. And the backup is missing the same 17 minutes. No one had announced how much footage was missing. A phone vibrated somewhere among the trustees, then went unanswered. Evelyn turned slowly toward Daniel. How did you know the length of the missing segment? His mouth opened, but no answer came. The outside auditor connected a second drive from the independent recording box mounted inside the loading bay. The screen changed. Timestamp 2:06 a.m. Victor's employee rolled a cart of genuine controllers toward the scrap bins. Timestamp 2:11. Daniel entered through the service door. Timestamp 2:14. He watched as the modules were exchanged, then removed a keycard from his pocket and entered the maintenance office. The video continued until 2:23. 17 minutes. Victor stared at the floor. Daniel looked once toward the nearest exit and found security already standing there, not touching him, simply waiting for instruction. Evelyn removed her CEO badge and placed it beside her signature on the disposal order. Disable Mr. Pike System Access. Freeze all payments to Hale Medical and North Bridge. Preserve every device, invoice, message, and recording under legal hold. Notify the state regulator and law enforcement. Her voice did not rise. That made the decision heavier. Margaret stirred on bed number 7 as the medical team prepared to move her. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then found Marcus beside the rail. She saw the red discarded label still clinging to the metal. Her fingers closed weakly around his hand. You didn't save me because of who I am. No, ma'am. Margaret looked past him at Evelyn, Daniel, Victor, and the trustees who had once accepted the word dead without looking closer. That is why they finally see who you are. The loading court went completely still. Marcus stood beneath the banner promising the future of patient safety, his wounded palm resting quietly against the rail of the bed they had thrown away. Evelyn asked to speak with him privately. He looked at the cameras, the foundation agreement, and the people whose decisions would shape every patient who came after Margaret. What happens next, he said, shouldn't be private. The loading court emptied slowly, not with applause but with the careful silence people carry after realizing they had mistaken confidence for truth. Daniel Pike's access badge was deactivated before he left the property, and Victor Hale's contracts were placed under legal hold while state investigators secured the invoices, service logs, controllers, and recording box. Marcus watched none of it with satisfaction. He stood beside bed number 7 until Margaret was moved safely into the cardiac unit, then returned the yellow flashlight to Nia when her aunt brought her to the hospital. She looked first at his bandaged hand, then at the red discarded label still clinging to the rail. Is Grandma Margaret okay? She asked. Marcus nodded. She's getting the care she needs. Nia released a breath she had been holding and slipped her hand into his. 3 days later, the hospital board met in an open session instead of behind the glass doors Evelyn once preferred. The false complaint against Reed Medical Repair was withdrawn. The city removed the red seal from Marcus's testing station, and the independent auditor placed a written finding into the public record stating that his procedures had been careful, documented, and within the scope of his license. Evelyn stood before the staff without her usual row of assistants. Marcus Reed was not lucky, she said. He was careful when we were careless, disciplined when we were defensive, and humane when our system was not. She offered to pay the shop's debts and give him an exclusive hospital contract. Marcus looked at the polished table, the waiting attorneys, and the same people who had once accepted Daniel's paperwork because it was easier than listening to a mechanic in a worn jacket. I don't want a private rescue, he said. I want a public rule. He agreed to help only after the board approved independent inspections before any medical equipment could be discarded. 2 technical signatures from separate departments, protection for workers who challenged unsafe records, and a community representative on the equipment committee. Every restored device would be listed publicly, along with the clinic or patient program receiving it. Evelyn also agreed that Marcus's name and Nia's image would not be used in hospital advertising. The decision cost her more than an apology. She stepped away from daily operations during the investigation, released the hospital's previous purchasing records, and accepted 90 days of oversight work with the community clinics affected by the shortages. Margaret did not ask Marcus to forgive her daughter. She only said, a second chance should have work attached to it. Weeks later, Hope Street Free Clinic received the first 3 restored beds. Marcus did not stand beneath a banner or hold a ceremonial check. He pushed bed number 7 through the clinic doors with both hands on the rail while Evelyn, wearing a plain coat and no badge, asked quietly if she could take the other side. Marcus studied her for a moment. He did not say everything was forgiven. He simply moved over enough to give her room. Nia walked behind them carrying the yellow flashlight, no longer as evidence in a fight, but as part of her father's toolbox. In the treatment room, Marcus locked each wheel, tested the alarm, and tightened one final screw beneath the silver oak emblem. The red discarded label had been removed and preserved in the hospital's training room beneath a single sentence. A label is not a diagnosis. Margaret arrived later with her repaired walker and watched an elderly patient settle safely onto the bed. No one spoke for several seconds. The small click of the wheel lock sounded louder than any speech. Nia leaned against Marcus's arm and asked why he had not let Evelyn pay for everything. He looked at the clean rail, the scuffed flashlight in her hand, and the patient breathing more easily beneath a warm blanket. Money could have rescued us once, he said. A fair rule can rescue people we'll never meet. Outside, evening light moved softly across the clinic windows. Marcus closed his toolbox, leaving the yellow flashlight on top, and the room grew quiet not because anyone had been defeated, but because everyone finally understood that dignity had been there from the beginning, waiting for someone willing to look closely enough to see it.